Hello everybody! Good morning, afternoon, evening, or otherwise. How's it going? Why is the bar empty? Because I will not be the star of the show today. Today I will be interviewing someone else, and I did not think it appropriate to draw the attention away with my VTuber model. And so I've hidden it. As well as a bunch of the other channel point redeems and stuff. But that's just, you know, I just felt as though that we'll keep the focus on where it should be. And that is because today is very exciting for me, as I will be interviewing and doing Q&A with a couple of people from Fantastic Pixel Castle. If you remember my video that I made about a week ago covering Project Ghost, which is an upcoming MMO. So we'll wait for the ad break to finish, and then I will unmute myself, and we will hang out and begin asking some questions. All right, so I think that should be good. So I believe now is a good time to swap on over. I'm gonna let them know. Ad break finished. Unmuting now. Hello, hello, hello.
Hello.
Hello. Thank you for joining me. For everyone who doesn't know, I have been joined with a couple of wonderful people from Fantastic Pixel Castle who are working on the next upcoming MMO in development project, Ghost. Why don't you introduce yourself, starting with Mr. Street?
Hey, I'm Greg Street. People call me Ghost Crawler, and I am the studio head of FPC.
Hi, everybody. I'm Faye. I'm the community manager of FPC, and we're really happy to be here and say hi to all of you.
Yeah, very exciting. And thank you again for giving me the opportunity to join in and do this. This is very exciting for me. I'm a big MMO fan. I've played so many, and yeah, this is exciting. So for anyone who doesn't know, just a quick summary. What is Ghost?
Greg, why don't you do this one?
Ghost is a next-generation Western-style MMORPG. We feel like it's been a while since a new game came out that really kind of captured the community. And so we think that our timing is right to make a new MMO and light the world on fire.
All right, cool. Then get your hazard suits, because, yeah. Anyway, and thanks to you guys, I got the opportunity to play it. I made a video about it, and Faye asked me to ask my community just questions and stuff, or rather prompt my community to ask questions about it, since, you know, a lot of them are MMO players. I play a lot of Final Fantasy, I make Final Fantasy content, and, you know, so I do have a bunch of questions. However, yes. I've categorized them so that we can decide which one you would like to tackle first. I've put them in 3 categories. They are player expression questions, so questions having to do with the player's choices and customization. Game dev questions, this is going to be the biggest one. There's the most amount of questions in this one. And uncomfortable questions, questions that you're probably going to have to answer eventually at some point, but maybe are not the easiest ones to do so.
All right. I appreciate you being so organized. That's awesome.
So what'll it
Maybe,
be?
I don't know, do you want to do the game dev ones last, just because there's the most there and we don't want to run out of time? Or
yeah,
these are all fine. I mean, one of the things that's weird about our studio is we don't have a lot of secrets. We're kind of fine talking about the game and what we think of things, so.
Okay. Well, yeah. Then, I guess if I could suggest the uncomfy questions first, get them out of the way, and nice. I think a lot of people would appreciate that. So, the first one, no online game lasts forever. MMOs are no exception. However, there's been a lot of discussion recently about games preservation, and people wish they could at least just play some games that are no longer being supported, but there's no official or legal means to. Will there be an end-of-life plan for Ghost, even if it's decades down the line?
I mean, the truth is we don't know. That's, you know, that's kind of a good problem to have once we know the game is successful and people love it. I would like to say, yes, we will come up with a plan. We don't know yet what that plan
would be
will
hard. I don't know what that is, but I'll do it.
I think it's one of the things that I feel like I want to say now that I should have said at the start is Ghost is about a little over a year and a half old. It's like full stop as the game, right? So
the software is only like a year old. The first 6 months was us just like on paper.
Yeah. So, you know, when we talk about what we want to do in the future, a lot of it is still sort of a little bit kind of grounded in what we have to complete today to get to that point. If that makes sense.
Okay. Yeah, that's understandable. Yeah. It's good that you're at least thinking about it. I think a lot of people will be very hopeful.
One way to think about it is there's kind of 2 ways to design a game. There's one school of thought that's like, let's design the whole game on paper and then just go execute. We're very much the opposite side, which is let's build it as we go, because you learn so much and kind of, you know, no plan stands first contact with the enemy or whatever your favorite idiom is. So you end up learning a lot once you start playtesting and things change. So we try not to overly design everything out.
Gotcha. Okay. So we'll probably get a very similar answer to this next one then. MMOs need money to continue development and to keep the servers going. Do you have any plans of what form of monetization that you have, you know, to keep Ghost going?
Oh yeah, we're fine talking about that one. So at a super high level, there's kind of 3 ways that are in vogue right now to pay for a game. One is like a subscription model. One is free to play with microtransactions, and one is just, you know, just buy the box, like old school. You buy the game and then you have the game. when you ask players which one they like, they hate them all because players don't want to spend money. But we think what makes the most sense for our game is probably the box model, which is not to say that we might not also have, cosmetic items, extra things you could purchase, but that would be ancillary. Like the main form of revenue to keep the studio going would be, hey, this game looks cool, why don't you buy it? And then maybe we sell expansions too down the road, that kind of thing.
Okay.
We call this innovative model games as a game.
I think a lot of people will be very happy about that, I think.
Uh-huh.
I mean, this kind of thing evolves quickly, so we'll, as we get closer to ship, we'll kind of see what is the current trend, what is working in the marketplace or not. But that's what we would like to do. Almost certainly not free to play. And the subscription model is great if you can get it, but you need a pretty decent sized player base that's committed, which makes it harder for people to try the game.
All right, well there you go. Shooting for buy to play. All right, is there an estimated time for the game's release or a public alpha or beta test?
No, partially because our philosophy is let's keep playtesting, and we don't want to be in development for like 8 more years or anything like that, but we also have to make sure the game is good, and we're not going to launch it until we're happy with it. So I think as we playtest more and more of the game, it'll start converging on something that looks like an alpha, and then a beta, and then early access, and then I think players will kind of know at the same time we know that, like, all right, this feels like this game's ready for live now.
Okay.
I will say we want to be fast. That's why we picked this particular studio model of not being part of, a giant publisher, feeling a little independent, because we think we can move a lot faster that way.
Yeah.
Okay.
And we know that there's a lot of interest in coming to playtest, and that there are a lot of people out there who are really excited about early games, and that's awesome. Right now, it's a little bit tough to kind of bring in a ton of people, and that would totally overwhelm our servers and break everything, and it wouldn't be a fun experience even coming to test at all if the game just doesn't work, which that's still valuable data for us, but it's not great. It's not a great experience for the testers. That's part of why we're so excited to be as open as we are, is to sort of say, like, we can't take in a bunch of testers right now, just in terms of the where the game is and where the tech is and stuff like that. But what we can do is sort of show you what we're doing, and we're still getting really valuable feedback from people who are tuning in to watch. So that's exciting.
Yeah. All right. Well, jumping off of that, leads right into the last of the uncomfy questions. Much as you can try your best, many MMO veterans understand that the first few years of an MMO can be pretty rough. Are you guys prepared for Ghost to suck on launch? And what safety nets or contingencies do you have, if any, should you not hit your stride quickly?
Our biggest mitigation against that is that we want to play test early and often, and we want to play test the end game, because often you see this pattern where an MMO launches and the level up experience is pretty cool, and then it gets to end game, and then players are like, oh, there's not really much to do, I'm kind of bored. So we want to make sure that we have a sticky enough end game. At the same time, doing so much play testing should help us test some of the problems that games often have on launch, like authentication or server queues or stuff like that. Who knows? Making software is hard, and I'm not going to say we won't have any problems, but our commitment is to try to fix it. If we think there are a couple of games out there, including Final Fantasy, that had a rocky launch and realized it and fixed it. There are a lot of other stories of games that had a rocky launch and never recovered, so hopefully that's not us. But we do. I mean, MMO is a commitment, right? And we don't want to spend all this effort making something that falls over on its face because of some easy fix that we could change and keep building towards something great.
Right.
I have nothing to add. Exactly what Greg said.
Okay, and I think that does it for all the uncomfy questions. I think you answered those pretty well. It makes sense.
It wasn't too uncomfortable.
Yeah, okay, that's
that's
good.
fine.
I think people will take that as a good sign that you're open to answering these questions, because I think a lot of times it's like, we don't want to answer that right now. But of course, understandably, sometimes it's just like, well, we don't know. It's early on. So.
Yeah.
It's true, yeah. I think like about the only thing we won't directly answer is, hey, can you please like spoil the whole plot for me? Because
Yeah, we're not going to do
for
that.
obvious reasons.
Right,
But
right.
yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, then we can move on to I guess we'll just go down the list, the player expression questions. First up on the list, are there plans for a transmog or glamour system where players can pick the look of their armor independent of the stats they give?
Yes. Easy enough.
Oh,
Like,
Yeah.
I mean,
yes. All right.
yeah, I mean, going a little further, like, you know, it's always a group effort, but I ultimately was the designer for the transmog system for WoW, and I even take some credit for that name, which I pulled out of a Calvin and Hobbes comic, which is now like one of the words that is kind of used industry wide to describe the feature. So I feel like we have a legacy there to live up to.
Nice.
I didn't know that came from a Calvin and Hobbes comic. That's so funny.
Yeah, Calvin had a transmogrification ray. That he would shoot at
Transmogrification
things.
ray.
Yeah.
Yeah.
People were even worried that somehow, like, Bill Waterston, the comic, like, somehow owned that word. Like, I don't think so. I think it's public domain.
Yeah. Well, I think a lot of people are going to be very, very happy with that answer.
I mean,
I think,
fashion is the end game, right? You gotta...
Fashion is the end game.
All right.
Right. I'm sure there are people in your chat. I know for me, when I play MMOs, when I play Final Fantasy, I will go out of my way to do dungeons or raids or things multiple times to get the exact drop that I want, so that I can put the outfit together that I have in mind. That's the kind of thing that is interesting and exciting for a lot of people. So, yeah.
I think we're going to show some of Natalie's art in a minute, but one of the things that we've been working on with her is this is a fantasy world where people care about fashion. And so even like the peasants are not walking around in burlap sacks and stuff. Like even our kind of peasants look awesome. And we want that to even be more true of the heroes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
There
Regardless
is
of what's happening in the world, the drip is forever. That's really important in our lore.
Yes, there will be art. I think the question after this one, I think, might be a good time to show it.
Awesome,
But
awesome.
So this next one is how extensive will character creation be? Body options, race options, all that good stuff.
I mean, this is an RPG, so we want people to build their character, as opposed to like, a hero collector where you're just playing Tracer or Garen or someone. Like, you get to make your character in our game. You get to decide what they look like and name them and things like that. So we have not built our character customization yet. We feel like expectations are now really high among the players. So we'll see what we can do. Particularly if you look at some of the Eastern MMOs, they're insane. The level of eyebrow shaders and things like that. So we want people to look awesome. We want people to have a lot of control over what they look like. So we hope we can deliver on that. Definitely the goal is, hairstyles and colors and skin colors and tattoos and all of that stuff that people kind of are looking for.
All right, looking forward to what you guys come up with. And hopping off of that, will race options merely be aesthetic, or will they have some sort of gameplay effect as well, like racial bonuses and class limitations and stuff like that?
Yeah, so this may be a controversial one, but I am not a fan as a designer of racial bonuses, because what that ends up doing is it kind of forces players to pick the race based on, I get, extra jump speed or more crit or whatever, or I can only be a paladin if I pick this race. We really feel like race is just an expression. It's what, either for role-playing reasons or what you want to look like. So there are no restrictions. It's purely cosmetic. And maybe a little bit of role-playing stuff, but nothing that affects power.
Yeah, and you'll get your chance to roleplay as well with one of the races that I think we can show now, if it's all right.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. You want to pull up the Kiswan?
Yes. So this is one of the races that you'll be able to play in Project Ghost, the Kisuan. Oh, wait. Hold on. Have I broken it? There we go. Okay, fixed it. So this is one of the races. Do you guys want to talk about the Kisuan for a little bit?
Yeah, so one of the things we wanted to do with our world is kind of play towards player expectations, but not just kind of recycle the standard things you see in every fantasy game. So what I mean by that is Ghost doesn't have elves, and Ghost doesn't have orcs, and things like that. But we knew we needed like an elegant, playful, beautiful race. And so we started playing around with the Kisawan to fill that niche. As you can see, they're kind of, okay. The real inspiration for the Kisawan is I was at the Texas Renaissance Fair, and it was on Fairy Day, and a lot of people were dressed up in their like fairy outfits with wings and stuff like that. But for their headgear, they had branches with like flowers and lights and stuff in it. So it wasn't just like horns, it was actually branches. And so Bart, one of our concept artists, kind of coined the word branchlers. And that was the whole genesis of the Kisawan, is they have deer-like antlers that are a little more like branches than normal deer horns. And then a lot of the facial shape, the colors, the body proportions all kind of emerged from that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I like them a lot.
And one of the cool things about the Kisawan too is that those branchlers, like, they have flowers on them. They have different effects that we are kind of trying to think of, right? In ways that like players get to express themselves in really exciting ways that you may not be able to if we like just had humans. Do you know what I mean? It's like, what does it mean culturally if your Kisawan has, cherry blossom branchlers instead of like dogwood branchlers or something like that? I don't know. I'm making stuff up now. Shanti is going to hear this stream later and be like, Faye, I swear. But that's kind of the stuff that we get to play with when we try to explore outside of the elves and the goblins and the dwarves and the orcs and try to kind of come up with, well, what can we create that's ghost specific but still fits the like beautiful nature people niche. You know what I mean?
Yeah. A lot of people are very excited looking at the very like the fawn like aesthetic of them all.
Yeah.
So
this is, I will say,
Go ahead, Faye.
I was gonna say, we've never shown this art before. This is brand new to the public. So I'm loving watching the chat right now because this is, I think, really exciting for people. And I've been holding on to this. I think that these designs are absolutely gorgeous. And shout out to Natalie. She just killed it on these. I think they're amazing. But that's kind of one of the cool things about getting to be open and also like work with you on this is we get to kind of come in and say like, hey, does your community like the Kisawan? And as far as I can tell, they do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, big fans.
Yeah, fawning over it all.
About customization is we had fun kind of deciding, well, what skin/fur colors can they be? And Natalie played with the deer-like spots, but then we said, well, what else can we go there? We decided cat-like stripes was like too far out, like that pushed them out of kind of feeling like forest-dwelling herbivores. But we played with other things too, like baby tapirs have really cool spots. So one of the customization options will be spots like that.
Yeah. Damn, I'm so honored to be the first one to show. This is a JoCat exclusive. What you guys are getting.
Yes.
World first.
Mm-hmm. Well, thank you for giving me the opportunity to show these off. I hope people look forward to playing these. I'm looking forward to seeing them. They're really, really cool. But yeah.
Yeah, me too. I can't wait to see them in the build.
Mm-hmm. I can't wait to hear about all the animation bugs that you guys are going to have to deal with. Good luck.
Yeah, like to set expectations, we decided early on that we are not doing the like backwards bending legs for the Kisawan because it's a huge animation challenge.
Right.
Tails TBD, but definitely more human-like feet.
Yeah.
It gets complicated with clothes too, trying to have the same clothing that fits on every other character, but they have to bend backwards in a different way on the Kisawan. Yeah. I don't even want to think about that.
Yeah, I love those videos where people swap skeleton rigs of like fighting game characters and just having them just go completely nuts. Anyway, last player expression question. It seems as though classes are going to be tied to faction and lore, as we've seen with the Dreamblade. Will you be making equivalent themes for each faction, like a Dreamblade equivalent for a desert faction, or do you want each faction to have distinct class lineups?
Oh yeah, each faction has a distinct class lineup. So the Dreamblade is a melee DPS. there will be other factions with a melee DPS, but they won't be like heavy plate with a sword and some magic. We'll find different ways to kind of express that. And, if it doesn't work, maybe some factions don't have a tank or don't have a healer or whatever. We want them to feel different that way. Really excited about the faction design. Our world building team's just done a really cool job there.
We showed off back in February, I think, we showed off some concept art for another faction called the Ash Hands, and that is a very like fiery. I mean, they're called the Ash Hands, right? So they're a very fiery faction. You see, like one of the concepts of the characters had like magma cracks going up her hands and stuff like that. But if you kind of look at all of those, they're very almost like mobile kind of DPS feeling. There were some gunslingers. There was the woman with a rope, like a fire rope dart. There was I think the most popular design on social media for that one was what we've been sort of lovingly calling Gatling Girl, which was this sort of Western samurai combined light armor, heavy artillery girl with like an absolute chaotic grin. I don't think I identified anything in those concepts that would have been like a healer or a tank. That doesn't mean they won't have one, but when we think about grounding classes in culture and classes in lore, maybe their world, you have to move too quickly to really kind of buckle down and like set up defenses or something like that. That's the kind of lore that we think about if we're thinking about class design and things like that too.
Okay.
And our factions, again, they're just for storytelling purposes and thematic. Like, you can have a group that has members from all the different factions. It doesn't prevent who you can play with or anything like that.
Right. It's more
Right,
theme
yeah.
of the class rather than faction you join and have allegiance to.
Exactly.
Right.
That makes sense.
But they do have like sections in the city, so you can go to the courts section, and it's kind of themed appropriately and the kind of stories there that you might expect.
Yeah, that makes sense. Final Fantasy XIV works similar, where like the Marauders are from Limsa, and they have a culture built, around Limsa and their pirates and stuff like that. So, yeah.
Right, but they're not like at war in gameplay sense with other factions or anything.
Right. Okay. All right. And I think that's it for the player expression questions. I'm sure you'll be able to answer more of them as more of the aesthetic and art style of the game starts to become more developed, as that sort of things that like later down the line once the game starts working. Now then, we can
have
move
some
on.
clever ideas for expression. I hope they pan out.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing what they are. Can you give us like a hint as to some ideas that you have? Or you want to keep it under wraps for now?
Trying to think of what we've given away, or what we've spoiled already.
Remember,
This
if
may
you
be-
say it,
I know.
go ahead.
This may be a minor one, and I'm not 100% sure we'll do it, but one of the things we've talked about are having special effects for sheathing or unsheathing your weapon, rather than it just like being drawn out of a scabbard. Like, we can do some kind of magic or particle effect. And then that's a collection mechanic of like, oh, I want the green butterfly sheathing animation, things like that.
Ooh, all right, you heard it here first. Guaranteed, definitely gonna be in there
promise.
on release.
This is the risk of talking about things early.
Nothing changes in
sometimes stuff doesn't
development.
Work out. Right.
What is said
That's
during
true.
development will definitely be there
Right.
when
you
it's
promised
finished.
the Kissawan would look exactly like that.
Mhm. All right. Cool. I've got a couple of silly questions. We can lightning round silly questions just to break up some things. So,
Nice.
just 3 of them. Firstly, can we pet the dog or other creature?
Yes, almost certainly.
Yeah.
I hesitate because we don't know if we have dogs in our world. Like, we just haven't got to that point yet. But we will have something dog-like and cat-like that you could pet.
All right, good.
I think this came up with the crystal creature that we showed.
Ah, the one that munches on crystals, yeah.
The one that munches on crystals. There were a lot of questions about can we pet the crystal gremlin, and crystal gremlin is not in the game yet, but will things be pettable? Yes, because I don't want to get dragged to filth by can I pet that dog on social media.
The highest honor. Okay, next one. What kind of music do you guys like to listen to?
Oh. Yeah. A little bit of everything. I'm kind of all over the place. I think my most recent concert that I went to see was Dream Theater on one of the Prog Nation tours, so I listen to a lot of prog rock and metal. But I'm also very, very into K-pop and stuff right now. And I've been listening kind of nonstop to the Cat's Eye new EP. If people here are icons, I am also an icon. Shout out. So I'm genuinely all over the place. Everything from like I said, prog rock to Megan Thee Stallion to, I'll pull up a lot of stuff when I'm working. I tend toward lo-fi when I'm working because otherwise I will find I start typing the lyrics that I'm listening to because I can't separate my brain out that way, and that you don't want to type lyrics in a press release.
Greg,
what about you?
Overall, I would say like classic rock. I also love blues and some kind of more like a little bit of funky country because I live near Austin. Also like a lot of game soundtracks. That's often my background music.
All right, good. People can take those and write up some conspiracy theories as to what it means. And last one, Ghost. It's called Ghost. Are there ghosts? Will there be ghosts?
Spoilers.
Probably not. Our, I said we wanted to put a twist on some of the tropes. So our version of undead are not, like, we don't have skeletons and zombies and liches. We have something else. And so right now we don't have anything that kind of fits that spirit niche. And this all gets into the story, which I don't want to spoil, but our whole, like, the role of the afterlife and what happens when you die is kind of important to the story, and so far you don't come back as a ghost or anything.
Damn.
Honestly, I think NetEase named it that because they needed a code name for the game. It's like, well, it's Ghost Crawler's game, let's call it Ghost.
False advertising. I can't believe it.
Yeah. Hopefully we'll have a real name soon and we can stop calling it by its code name and it'll feel more like a real game then.
All right, thank you for answering.
Our biggest controversy. Ghost MMO doesn't have Ghost in it.
Thank you for answering those. I got more of an actual answer than I was expecting, so thank you.
Yeah.
All right, and now we can finally go into the nitty-gritty, the meat, the game dev questions. We can begin. What has been the most challenging hurdle the team has had to work through?
In terms of game design, or?
I guess so, yeah. Whether it be game design or managing the team, it's quite a small team for an MMO, as I've noticed, or, budget, time, things like that.
It's a small team. We are remote and we are globally distributed, which presents some challenges such as there is no time of the day that you can pick that's convenient for everyone to come to a meeting. So we've all had to get like really good at asynchronous communication and sometimes having meetings twice. Like, it works. I know it's a little painful compared to people that are used to like, let's all meet in the office and everyone's in the same city, let alone the same time zone. So that has been a challenge. In terms of game design, we love the idea of Blue Zones having like, I'll just call it like roguelike elements of there's a bit of progression within the Blue Zone and then that resets when you go to the next Blue Zone. Because getting more powerful is like really fun in MMOs. And we're trying to kind of have it both ways by having the long-term progression of you get character levels and better gear, but also a cyclical short-term progression every time you're in a Blue Zone. And we originally started out handling that like through building like very much Valheim style. I build a little base and a forge and everything. We've moved away from that. We've had a couple of different ideas. The one we have in the game right now, I think, is a keeper. Like, everyone's pretty excited about it.
Faye, anything you want to add?
I think from my point of view, a lot of other, ways that games are handled in the industry is to keep very, very quiet about them up until like you're ready to announce everything and the game looks perfect and you have a trailer and you're at the Game Awards and everybody's hyped on social media and stuff like that. And we sort of have gone a very different direction where we're saying, this is what a game looks like when it's 6 months old. This is what a game looks like when it's a year old. This is what a game looks like when it's a year and a half old, right? And there is not a lot of precedent, at least from, where we are in development, there's a little bit. I mean, I do want to call out Ashes of Creation for doing this as well. They've also been very, very open about their development. But it's hard to know how people are going to respond to seeing a game this early, and especially in a world where we really believe that like first impressions are the impression that people carry forward. There is always this question of, can we show people what a game looks like as it grows, or are people just going to decide this is what Ghost is always going to look like, and I don't want to play it? And we've been pleasantly surprised. We've gotten a lot of excitement and interest of oh, I want to follow along in the development journey and watch how this MMO develops and grows and turns into a place that maybe I want to call home on the internet. But doing that is always a little scary, coming from, larger places or more traditional studios where we might say, no, we don't show that. So it's always like confronting that instinct not to share, and we have to, like, part of my job is getting to sit down and be like, okay, well, like, why don't we want to share that? And maybe there's a legitimate reason, like, oh, we're gonna spoil the whole story if we share that one, right? Or maybe, but also maybe it's sort of like, oh, actually, maybe we do share this, maybe we do push ourselves in this way and get a little input from the public and see what people think. And it's, whenever we do that, we've always been very pleasantly surprised and really excited to see people come in and tell us that they want to see the game grow. So that's definitely been the big challenge, at least from my point of view, as well, is kind of flexing that muscle as a studio. And we really do it together. This isn't something where I'm just like coming in and grabbing a bunch of things off of, our shared drives and throwing them on the internet. I make sure, with this being my job, I really want to make sure that we're all, as a studio, like gung-ho on what we're sharing and excited to put it out there.
I think most people will appreciate that, yeah. One of the best decisions that I think contributed to Baldur's Gate 3's success is, being open to feedback and just giving people the first act and just letting them play with it and break it and be like, this sucks, this is good, do this. And yeah, so it's nice to see more people going that direction.
It is scary, and I think Faye has done a great job navigating it, but we all kind of live in fear of the engagement bait article, video, Reddit, whatever that comes out of like, Ghost looks like ass. And then we're on the defensive kind of trying to like say, no, we're showing it too early to get feedback. This isn't going to be what it looks like. But hopefully, as we build up a community, there will be people who can kind of defend us and say, yeah, your game developers are going to talk to you early if you're like that mean about what you see. Yeah. So far, it's been okay, and people are pretty understanding of like, oh yeah, that's just Unreal assets. That's not what the game's going to look like.
Yeah. Well, there's also this idea of context, right? I think, Greg, when you started working on World of Warcraft and Age of Empires, devs were in forums with their players all the time, and that was just very, very normal on the internet. And then as companies got really big, that kind of stopped, and you had your PR team and your social teams, and there was like a collect group of few people who were allowed to go talk to people anymore to really control the narrative. And that was sort of alongside the rise of leak culture, I feel like, which I know people have complicated feelings on. I don't want to get into that, but it turned into this almost this like arms race of, we have to be extra careful about what we share and what we don't, because we want to make sure we're controlling the narrative. And we're trying to kind of go back a little bit to where we were in the, where games were when we were on forums with our players, because the other thing that's happened is as games have changed in that time when people have been silent, there's been a lot that's changed technologically as well. And so there is this like loss of information that's happened. And so when we come out and we say this is what a game looks like this early, we're also talking about what it takes to make a game, why we made the decisions we made. And so we believe, and so far our track record has shown, that if we just like tell people what tech we're using, why we made this decision, what will work and what won't, and thank you for your feedback, this is the kind of thing we're thinking about implementing, this maybe we could implement, and unfortunately we can't do this one because the tech doesn't exist yet, people are more likely to say, oh, that makes sense, right? And so far it's worked. I think when everyone has more information to understand the decisions that are made, it's better for everybody.
Looks like I just need to fix something on my stream real quickly. I put a little command but forgot to assign anything to the command, so I'm going to remove that from the title. I apologize for that. Okay, yeah, and yeah, I think I can speak for most people that like this transparency is appreciated. I do hope you guys can weather the like clickbait annoyance and kind of rage bait as best you can. Fortunately, that's just unfortunate that the internet has become that quite a bit, but you guys seem to be handling it pretty well, and yeah, props to you for sticking it through. So
kind of at the end of the day, we're gonna just keep making the game, right?
Yeah.
You know, people can say what they want to say, and that's fine.
Mm-hmm.
And we're gonna keep making the game.
I understand. But Greg, you mentioned that there is a new kind of build of the contraption system that you, what you're calling like building contraptions and stuff, and I assume you're gonna be getting quite a bit of feedback. The whole team is gonna get feedback and opinions about it, as it's not something we often see in MMOs, but I was curious, what are the thoughts and intent behind adding something like building? Like, why add building?
The Blue Zone represents such a unique opportunity for players to feel like they're breaking the rules. And so we want there to be a sense of like, I can't normally do that in MMO. Like MMOs don't normally let you like build things because it would interfere with other players', you know, experience. But because the Blue Zones are these small private experiences, we wanted to the designery way I talk about it is like add more verbs to the game. So not only are you like traversing and fighting, but we let you engage in diplomacy, and we let you explore, and we let you gather resources and build things with those resources. In your video, you mentioned how it doesn't feel well integrated yet, and we totally agree. And it's something we're working on, is kind of trying to make it all feel like the same experience. Improving the user interface for how you put down buildings, and trying to add a little more of a strategy to it. I really like the idea that not every class or every role has access to the same ones, and we might even make that more of the roguelike part of the game, that you can't assume you can build every contraption every time. And so if you can't build a bridge, well, maybe you need to build a jump pad or something else instead to help you with traversal.
All right, yeah, that makes sense. Implementing mechanics and ideas that can't really be done in like a shared world, like that everyone. Okay, yeah.
Right. Like it's okay to build towers all over the map because you're going to finish the Blue Zone and it's going to go away. You don't have to like deal with the consequence of, well, players now have filled up the map with towers.
A new player's not going to log in and see a pile of boxes next to the main city. All right.
Yeah, in the same way that you might not like build a giant tree house in the middle of a public park, but you can do it in your own backyard, right?
Yeah.
Right. Well, yeah. Okay. Cool.
And the term contraption was a conscious decision to kind of shift it away from, I'm not building a house. We have an idea for player housing, but it's not something you do every Blue Zone. You're not building a forge to make your gear. You're building like tools to help you solve a problem.
Right. I remember hearing in another interview taking inspiration from Valheim, but not wanting to like set up base.
Over and over again. Yeah, it works for Valheim, so you're not doing it over and over again, because Valheim's like, you know, a multi-hour game.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. Thank you for kind of giving a little developer insight. And thank you for being receptive to my feedback as well.
Yeah. That's why we do it. We love to hear the feedback.
Your feedback was great. One of the things that I loved about your video, and I told you this, but I'm also going to call you out on stream, is that you made a beautiful 26-minute video of a review and exceptionally well-delivered feedback, and then ended it with, I feel like I can't give good feedback right now. I think you gave amazing feedback. I think that was great. So I have shown that video to people when they're like, how do I give feedback in a game that like I really love? I'm alpha testing and I don't know what to say, and I'm like, just go watch this. JoCat handles it masterfully.
Thank you.
Watch that.
I appreciate that. Yeah, it was originally supposed to be only like 5 minutes, but yeah. And I do have to credit taking a lot of inspiration for how I talk about games from my influences, but most notably, if you guys want another good example, those in the audience as well, Iron Pineapple and his Steam Dumpster Diving series, he is fantastic in how he gives feedback. So yeah, if you that's another good example. But this isn't about me, this is about you guys, so we can move on to the next question, which is, what are your thoughts on crafting and gathering, and what would be your vision on something like that? And even more so, if there is, are there plans for a player-run economy?
So crafting and gathering, yes. We already talked about how you can gather in a blue zone to build contraptions. We also like the idea that you are getting resources to help make better armor or things like that. So we'll definitely have that part of the game. The player economy, so the honest answer here is there are two big ways to go. And this is true of like any MMO. There is the one where like it's all about the player economy, and players have this fantasy of being this like titan of industry. I'm going to corner the market on Mythroller. I'm the only one who can make this breastplate, and people are going to come from miles around to get my breastplate. And then there's the other one where you don't have to worry so much about gold farming and item dupes and things like that because you lock down the player economy a little more. Like, I'll give an example of like Destiny doesn't spend a lot of calories on this like really robust player economy, and I think the game is great. So, and neither is the right one. I think overall most players, if polled, would say, well, yeah, player economy is a really critical part of the MMO experience, and I agree, but it does come with some costs and a lot of investment into, you know, keeping that economy under control. So we do have some like clever ideas, I hope, on how to make sure we can kind of go both ways without the game. One other thing I'll say is I have a little bit of an axe to grind with the concept of auction houses because I find they're not very social. I go to the auction house and it's almost like a vending machine that spits out the resources I want, but I'm not really interacting with other players, and I don't pay attention to the player who like put this stuff on the auction house or anything. They also work better with the kind of old school concept of realms, of like, oh, this is a community of a few hundred people, so I'm the only person on the server who has this resource. It's harder in the more modern concept where there are no realms and, you know, you can play with anyone because you're not like deciding what server you're on ahead of time. Sorry, that was a long-winded answer, but there's so many different directions you can go with a feature like this.
Gotcha. Okay.
Yeah. I think it's also worth noting that, you know, there are what I would call cautionary tales of games where player economies have gotten wildly out of control when they're not well managed and regulated. And what to well manage and regulate a player economy, you're actually bringing in an economist, like a real, like a person who studies economics to do that. And there have been people who study player economies in games and things like that. I think Gaia Online is a very famous example of like a browser forum player situation where the economy was went so wildly out of control that it like people got, you know, PhDs and dissertations on that. It comes down to a lot of like what kind of investment of time really do we feel like is going to create a good experience for our players versus if we don't have the space in what we want to design, is it going to go so wildly out of control that it creates a bad experience? Do you know what I mean?
Right.
I think I'm probably just restating what Greg said in a different way, but
no, it's all good.
yeah.
It's a controversial one, and I know there are players who will be like, how can you not have a player economy? You can't be an MMO without that. So it's the kind of thing that we will definitely want to hear more feedback on.
Yeah, it is definitely, some people do enjoy that, but, you know, it all comes down to, do you want to be EVE Online?
Right. EVE does a great job at being EVE Online. Does that mean every MMO needs to go that route?
Right. Okay.
Also, shout out to EVE Online. When they finally created an official Microsoft Excel integration, I actually almost started playing again because I was like, ooh, that's what I needed. I don't know if that's the kind of place we want to go. Do you know what I mean? Where people are like, I wish they would just partner with Excel. But for the people that play EVE, and I am one of those people, that's what you want.
Right.
And that's a great tool.
Yeah. Now, Greg, you mentioned something very interesting that I hadn't considered before about how auction houses and trading and stuff like that disincentivizes the social nature, which brings me to the next question. What do you have planned to incentivize group and social activities? And what do you have planned to discourage griefing and perhaps bad behavior?
So we feel like the secret sauce of the MMO is the social experience. Like I say all the time, you know, if you want an outstanding single player story where you can like build your character to your heart's content, like play Baldur's Gate. It's an amazing game. It solves that problem really well. And I know you can theoretically play co-op and things like that, but it's definitely not an MMO. MMOs, for me, are about the other players, whether that is your best friend that you play with all the time or some rando you see once and never see again. But you know they're there and you know they're a real player. We have a lot of ideas for what makes social work. We were pleasantly surprised to find that the concept of exploration in a blue zone, because you don't know what it's going to look like, it's much more about communicating with your group about where do we want to go and what strategy do we want to use versus, say, running a dungeon where everyone has memorized everything and it's just about execution and usually it's silent. There's no need to communicate because everyone knows where everything is. So blue zones, by their very nature, are pretty social and encourage a lot of communication. And then we have things like, this is simple, but we have resources where it takes 3 people to click on the resource in order to get stuff out of it. Really trying to take a page from Guild Wars in that running into another player should never be a bad experience. You should never feel like, oh, I'm going to go somewhere else because I don't want to compete with quest kills or I don't want to compete with resources. Like, you should always be happy when there are other players around. And of course, we'll have guilds and friends lists and all those kind of standard abilities, standard features. Griefing is challenging. I mean, it is a social game, and when you get that, you get people that like to push the boundaries. We have some experience dealing with that from both World of Warcraft and League of Legends. We do want to have PvP in the game, which creates a whole, I mean, it's not going to be mandatory PvP, but we do want to have that as an option, which creates whole new opportunities for griefing. But if you lock that down too much, kind of like with the player economy, you lose some of the magic of having to interact with other people. If you just say, well, I'm going to turn other players off so I don't have to worry about them.
Yeah. I think when your gameplay incentivizes communication and incentivizes helping people, there is a baseline expectation for better behavior. And it doesn't fully control for the griefing problem, but it does mean that when you come into a social space, there is the social contract, right? Oh, I'm entering into this area. I understand what the rules are for me to be here. And sometimes those rules are very blatantly spelled out, and sometimes they're less blatantly spelled out, and you kind of learn them with time. In a game that encourages communication and encourages exploration, you start to see this like expectation of, oh, we don't really do griefing here, which is kind of nice. I've seen this in other games, some that I've worked on and some that I play a whole bunch. I mean, I do want to shout out the Final Fantasy XIV community. That's been my MMO home, since 2020. Just an inherently kind community, and they have a lot of stuff that's just built into the game that really encourages like bringing sprouts, new players, along and showing them cool stuff and letting them get the good drops and things like that. But I also want to shout out our testers, and the most recent playtest we ran was the first time that we had like gear in the game for testers, and what we found was that players, and this was fairly unexpected, but what players would do is when they finished their blue zone runs, they'd come back to the main city, the little kind of main area that we have right now for people to just start in, and they would drop all of their gear so that if people didn't get gear drops while they were in their blue zones and wanted to pick something up, they could do it there and then level it up and take it to their own blue zones.
People would
and so there were just piles of shoes.
Yeah.
Yeah. But it was also, I was so touched in that moment because we didn't tell people to do that. We didn't ask people to do that. That just became like based on the game that we're building. That is the tester community that we have, but it's also just, I think, kind of inherent, like, in the kind of gameplay that there is, you know what I mean? So I'm not going to say that we've solved everything and it's going to be a perfect utopian world. Obviously, the internet is the internet, but it gives me hope that when we focus on like building an experience, like Greg said, that seeing another player should be exciting and fun, and you're like, oh, this is somebody I can play with and get to know, or I could just play with a little bit and then never see again, but it was still a good experience. When that's the expectation and that's baked into the gameplay, it just makes for a much more positive baseline.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I remember that. That was really fun seeing all the hand-me-downs. Like, oh,
yeah,
they've upgraded. I feel behind. Oh, sweet. Sweet. This
so let me just go get. I'm gonna get this hat and these pauldrons and this.
Lightly used.
Putting this on.
Yeah. All right.
Give people a chance to be kind to each other, and hopefully, maybe they'll take
will.
it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. All right. Just to give you guys a little bit of pace, I know we're approaching an hour, but we're halfway through the dev questions.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
So yeah, next is potential ideas to combat power creep. Is it not a big deal? Encourage it, mitigate it, not care?
There are a lot of games that decided like power creep is the devil and we're just gonna like try to stop it and not have a lot of vertical progression. I worry in the long run those have not been as sticky as the ones that embrace like, yeah, it's fun to see the numbers go up. It's fun to get a better sword and hit for more damage. So I'm kind of okay with it. Very long-lived games like WoW and Final Fantasy have to deal with this problem of, wow, those numbers got really big. But again, that's kind of a nice problem to have. If like our game is 10 years old and we're worried about hitting for 1 million damage, like, gosh, we've made it at that point.
We'll cross that bridge when we get to it.
Yeah. And we are doing some things, like I mentioned, in the blue zones, you get a lot of power, and then that resets when you leave the blue zone. So it lets us kind of pile on the power for short periods of time in the same way roguelike games do. And that definitely helps. We are also trying to avoid the best in slot phenomenon where it's kind of easy to sim out single target damage against a boss, like this is the perfect gear setup that I want, by making things a little more situational to where there's not always a right answer, which you have to do by making sure that the encounters don't just come down to like highest DPS always wins. Mm-hmm. So there'll still be power then, but it's less about a linear progression of I replace this breastplate with the next breastplate, and more about I have all these items, which are the ones that I want to use.
Yeah, that does sound like horizontal progression to me, which I am very excited about.
Horizontal progression has to be a big part of any MMO, I think, because you can't. The vertical progression is really important, but if you just rely on that, players run out of stuff to do. And so all of the horizontal progression about getting cosmetics or completing collections or wanting to like solve this story element which doesn't actually give you any power, like we think all of that stuff is also really important just to make sure the game is big enough.
All right, that's a pretty satisfactory answer. Yeah, I agree. So yeah, now this one, many have been concerned that blue zones being so being so significant may cause red zones to maybe be redundant or not necessary. Is that a concern that you have, or vice versa? And like, what if a player just only plays blue zones or just only plays red zones without touching the other?
Yeah, from like a systems design answer, it's easy because there is a reward you need to get out of blue zones that only comes from blue zones. There's another reward you need which only comes out of red zones, so you need to do red zones. So no one will be able to just opt out. They'll have to do both. Now, will we have players that prefer the red zone experience? Well, probably, and that's awesome. Like, MMOs have diverse audiences and people like different things, but the core loop only works if you go to both. So we're not worried about that. We do want to make sure that red zones are awesome because they're the more traditional MMO zone where you'll see a bunch of random players. So they need to feel like really epic. We want you to always see a lot of players. We don't want you to go off into a corner and feel like, oh, no one's here, which is often the experience when you go back to like a level up zone, 2 expansions later, it tends to be empty. We're really trying to avoid that problem with red zones.
So I do see a question in the chat, which is red zones are raid zones. And I do want to say, like, there are going to be some red zone there's going to be some red zone content that is raid focused, but red zones are also going to be like those big populated areas. So the really permanent areas that you might see. So I might if I can make a comparison to another MMO, maybe the Black Shroud in Final Fantasy 14, or wandering around Lenosha, something like that. Those are like the areas that we think of where you're running around, or you're doing your quest, you're killing your 10 ladybugs, and you see another player, and you can kind of wave at each other, and then either join up or walk past each other. That's the red zone experience.
Basically,
there will also be some raids. Yeah. So I think when people, this is actually why we've been focusing so much on the blue zones, because there isn't a great analog in MMO for them, kind of. Do you know what I mean? So we really want to make sure that they're fun and that they're interesting to MMO players. So we have been focusing really, really hard on them. But what it means is that we don't have a red zone right now.
Or a
because
dungeon, for that matter.
Right. But a good analog that I could think is if people want to play Ghost without the blue zones, that's kind of like trying to play Final Fantasy without the dungeons. You can't do it, right? Like, even you hit level 11, I think, and it's like, oh, you have to do Sastasha to progress in the story at all, to even go past level 30. It's, so it becomes a part of the expected loop. That's the game.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yellow Zone, that's just towns and stuff. Yeah. I feel like
Yellow Zone, we use Yellow Zone to refer to our city. There is going to be a big city that's kind of the core of where the players will want to go, where they'll interact with each other. All of the different factions are going to have like representative areas in that city. It's where I think a lot of the story is going to take place as well, before it sends you off into the world to go explore the different zones and things like that. But we want there to be kind of a place where all of the players want to congregate together and see each other.
Now,
and controversial maybe, but we have one city because we didn't want to have a bunch of dead cities. We wanted all the players to congregate in one place. And that also really fits our story, where it's kind of the last bastion of civilization.
Good. That answers a question that I was going to have later. All right, cool.
Yay!
So, speaking of cities, what are your considerations for fast travel between cities and red zones, or just from out in the wild back to the city? Will it be travel from anywhere to anywhere, real-time porters, and transportation, flying mounts, etc.? What are the thoughts on that right now?
I feel like real time would be such a nightmare with the floating shards. Like, oh, that blue zone over there is 8 hours away. Great. I'm gonna just start traversal and then walk away for a day. Come back in the evening. I don't want to do that.
This is something we decided to solve earlier because, again, with our playtesting, some of the feedback we were getting from players was, well, this just sounds like you're just jumping through portals and the world is going to feel disconnected because you're just going from instances to instances.
That is a big concern.
And so our world is this giant, we call it the Drift. It's this giant, almost whirlpool of shards, like millions of them, that are the remains of a planet that most likely blew up and formed all of these different places you could visit. And then the way you get around is on skyships. These are flying magical ships that follow the currents of the drift to take you where you want to go. And we certainly were not the first world to invent flying ships, but it really helps to make it feel like a real place, because we don't quite have this working yet, but the experience is you're in the city and you want to go to a shard, you go and get on your ship, and your friends or the party that's coming with you also get on your ship, and then the ship departs, and you can have a little cutscene, or you can chat with NPCs or do something during the journey. Now, technically this is a loading screen, and we're hiding the loading screen by having kind of something more interactive and cool. It also opens up the opportunity for, like, you can customize your skyship, you can name it, and you can decide which hull you want to add to which sails, and who knows if we'll do this, but I get excited about the idea of maybe you have to assemble your crew by going around and finding different NPCs, and they're going to be on your ship and you can chat with them when you're traveling. And so, it's not going to take 8 hours, like Faye said, to get to a different zone, but we want to have a sense of travel. We don't want...
Right.
I think one of the things that works against modern MMOs is this sense of, like, players must instantly teleport everywhere or they'll get bored. I think a little bit of travel is part of the recipe, because you have, these ebbs and flows of you do all this intense combat and then you kind of have downtime where you're traveling to the next place.
Would you say you're attempting to try and make it appear seamless?
Oh yeah, we would love to not actually have a loading screen that pops. We want to be our dream, and again, we don't have this built yet, is you see the shard as you're flying in, and you can even start to speculate a little bit of hey, did you guys see a dragon? I think we're gonna have to deal with a dragon on this shard. Or wow, all of these villages look like they've been caught on fire. I wonder what's happening. Or even hey, I think I saw, there's a waterfall there. I bet there's a treasure chest beyond that. And it kind of lets you start thinking about what you're going to do when you land, so that it's not literally, well, do you guys want to go left or right? Who knows?
Mm-hmm. There will be treasure chests behind waterfalls, by the way. Not necessarily every waterfall, but I know that's really important to people, so don't worry. We'll
contract to the player, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
But what I think Greg is trying to call out here is that we want the experience of moving between zones to feel interesting in and of itself, and not just it's when you load into a blue zone, it's not going to be the same blue zone animation of the skyship flying in every time. You will actually get to see what we want to have happen, right? We don't have this built yet, but what we want to have happen is you get to see the zone you're loading into, and you get to start strategizing. You get to start planning. That's fun. That's interesting. That makes the act of traveling there part of the gameplay, and that's one of the most interesting, I think, and social experiences that you can kind of build for the traversal option.
Okay. I imagine we're still talking about 90 seconds to 2 minutes, not 12 minutes of waiting on a boat. Yeah. People are just going to tab out.
Yeah, unless people want to have a boat party, at which point throw your yacht party, have a great time.
Yeah, one of my favorite times playing MapleStory was taking the boat from the Victoria Island to Orbis and just hanging out with folk. It was nice. Yeah.
I think those are the areas that in their interest of keeping players engaged for every second, developers kind of sand those rough edges off, and they're just no, you should be able to go from one dungeon to the next dungeon with nothing in between. But I think there's something to be said for the journey also.
Mm-hmm.
Again, as long as it's not 15 minutes.
Right.
Yeah. Not real time. We're not doing that. No.
I think that friction is, I can only speak for my community, but I know there's a lot of people in my circles that are going to be very happy to hear that, including some of that friction, and rough edges and slight inconvenience for the sake of the experience and novelty. So,
but also fiction. There's a question in the chat about role playing and just going on your airship, being able to kind of treat it as a home,
a hangout space.
That I think we want the airships to feel like something that is, you're going to be spending. You want to spend time on it. Do you know what I mean, mm-hmm. Greg? Do you want to talk more about the skyships?
I'm not sure what else there is. I mean, we spoiled most of it, I think.
Yeah. I think there are a lot of it's our answer to giving a mount at level 45 or something like that. We instead have this smaller option that kind of also sits in a place where players can maybe decorate it. None of this is permanent right now, but we want that to be a place that feels very homey.
Since randos and your friends will be on the ship with you, it kind of gives you a chance to show it off in a way that, maybe people aren't necessarily noticing what mount you're riding.
No, but they will notice the drapes that you got in that one raid. That's really, really hard.
I was just going to say, this gives you a lot of opportunities to have trophies and show off how cool you are.
Yes.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I look forward to it. Only a couple of questions left now. We're nearly done. Thank you so much again for lending your time.
Yeah.
Is the Holy Trinity truly law, or are hybrid classes a possibility?
I've said that we would love to ship with 30 classes, and in that world it does give us some room to have some that are a little more oddball and well, it's a healer, but it's a pretty tanky healer, or things like that. And particularly with groups of friends, I don't think we're going to enforce, oh, you better bring a tank. If someone wants to roll with 2 tanks and 2 healers, you be you,
Have fun.
Yeah. Now, we don't have a lot of classes functioning in the game yet, so we'll see how far we can push it. But for me, that's part of the joy of having so many, is you can do some weirder things.
Yeah, I think most people will agree. 30 is ambitious. Best of luck.
Yeah.
It's
We're down from
ambitious,
50.
but the way I explain it a lot is World of Warcraft shipped, I think, with 10 classes, but each of those classes had 3 specializations. And then, like, my team spent forever trying to make sure the elemental shaman is just as viable as the enhancement shaman. So all we're really doing is saying, look, instead of having 10 classes with 3 subclasses each, we're just going to have 30 classes.
Mm-hmm. That makes sense.
I do want to call out something with the 30 classes. This is something we talk about. We don't want a situation where 30 classes means that every class can do everything that every other class does. So, healers should feel important and valuable, which means that there will probably be less of like tanks or DPS necessarily being able to like fully heal themselves. That's something, and Greg, you can speak more to this than I can, in terms of the design and like the classes and things like that. But in having a wide variety of classes, one of the things we also want to make sure of is that those classes mean things.
Yeah, I take a little bit of the blame for that on World of Warcraft, because at the time that game was so alt unfriendly, people felt like, well, I invested all this time leveling up my warlock, and now my warlock isn't viable. So we would try to make sure that every class had enough tools to kind of work in every situation, and we just feel a little less of that pressure. For example, we want alts to be much more of a thing. We want the game to be very alt-friendly, with the assumption that most players will have several characters and they can switch between them. So if your character that you picked isn't ideal for the situation, maybe you should just bring a different one.
Pardon the snorting you heard in the background. That's my dog Muffin. She's just waking up, and she's
Hi,
just a
Muffin.
little, yeah.
Hi, Muffin.
Yes, I personally like that idea. There was a question.
Yeah, it kind of gets to that rough edges idea of like, sorry, I know you really love your Dreamblade. Your Dreamblade maybe isn't the best class for this particular piece of content. Like, you can do it. We're not going to lock you out, but maybe there's another option that would be a little more efficient here.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think it's okay for some classes to just not be good at certain situations. Yeah. All right, and we'll wrap it up with this last question, which I feel as though this whole Q&A has been answering this in pieces, but if you had to give it all in one, how will Project Ghost be unique? What distinguishes it from other MMOs? What do you think makes Ghost different?
I mean, from the very beginning, it was this idea of the game is different every day. We've all played way too many hours of MMOs where you level your 4th character and you go back to this zone and it's exactly the same, and you know where everything is, and you've done the quest and you're just kind of on autopilot. And then once you finish the zone, it's dead and you never go back to it. Likewise, you hit endgame, and endgame is about, we'll do these daily quests every day, or run this dungeon every day, and it just feels the same. And so the idea we had from the very beginning about Ghost was, we're going to make sure that blue zones are different every time you go. It doesn't mean they're like procedurally generated in the way that like Starfield is procedurally generated. It's more about telling a story, but the elements in that story can be all mixed up to where you don't know what to expect. You don't know what types of enemies are going to show up, or where they're going to be, or are they going to be friendly this time. And that sense of means that you never stop exploring in this game. Whereas a lot of MMOs, you explore it once and then it's on rails the rest of the time. And that really is, I mean, it's hard, don't get me wrong, but it really, I think, brings a freshness to the experience that we haven't seen in a long time.
Yeah, I would agree. I think it's an MMO that's about the journey. In other MMOs that I've played, there's this pressure to like complete the end game, and then maybe you go back and try to find interesting side quests that take you around all the different zones. But by that time, a lot of the zones are empty, or you're just kind of flying around looking for stuff. This is designed to be not that, right? It's designed to be a game that encourages that exploration from the get-go and like takes the pressure off of getting to the end as fast as possible. And there are of course going to be people who want to do that, and that's great and that's fine. And so we want there to be a sticky end game as well. But for people who want to log in and they're like, I don't really want to like push raids today, I want to just kind of explore blue zones and see what I can find.
Wow.
This is the game for
the
you.
game is the game. What a novel idea.
It's a game. Yes, the game's the game.
The game is the game. Well, all right.
The other thing that's unique about it's not the game so much as the way we develop the game is just this very transparent culture that we have, so that we hope by the time the game launches, players are like really excited about it because they've had their concerns mitigated or we fixed the things that weren't working. And so it's kind of low risk from that standpoint, as we don't have to do the big like, okay, the servers are up, and then players get in and say, oh, this feature is kind of lame actually.
Yeah.
Okay, well, those are all the questions that I was able to grab from my audience. I'm sure this will only spawn more questions.
Great.
Thank you,
bring it.
audience. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think that'll be it for now. Thank you guys so much for lending me your time and this opportunity. I can't thank you enough for...
Well, thank you for having us. This was absolutely wonderful, and we had such a blast just watching your video and listening to everything you have to say. So, yeah.
Yeah.
Once
thank
again,
you.
Happy
give
to do
good
it again
feedback.
sometime, and now we get the fun part of like watching the community react to the things we said and what we got wrong. And...
Yes, thank you. Well, yeah, ads are coming up soon and gonna kick me out, so I'd rather... I've been like pushing them and hitting the snooze button on them forever, but I've run out of snoozes, so I think that's a good place to call it. Thank you, Faye. Thank you, Greg, so much, and thank you, audience, for tuning in. And I hope I look forward to the next build of Ghosts and whatever news you have for us next time.
Yay! Thank you.
Thanks, JoCat.
And we'll see you guys.
Thank you so much,
later.
everybody.
Bye.